So have you ever been playing a new game only to have it unlaunch on you? Yes, unlaunch. Not cancel, not delay, just unlaunch. Well, if you're a Splitgate player, now you have, because Splitgate 2 has been unlaunched. It's went from version 1.0 back into beta. And here's the timeline of all that. May brought early access, June 6th was the full console launch, but by July they pulled the plug. And behind the scenes it's even worse, because 1047 Games is now laying off 30% of their staff. That's on top of them already having to do layoffs. They're also killing the original Splitgate, and, well, their CEO, who promised to make FPS great again, is, kind of eating his words. Let's rewind so you've got the full story. 1047 Games made headlines 4 years ago. You see, they had launched Splitgate 2 years prior, right? Now, if you don't know what Splitgate is, basically picture Halo meets Portal. It was an arena shooter where you place portals on walls, you travel through them, and it very much had Halo-style gameplay. If you enjoyed, say, using the DMR or the BR in Halo, they were basically making this game for you. And to be honest with you, it was absolutely goddamn fantastic. I loved it. I spent a good 3 weeks hooked on it across console and PC. At the time, it essentially filled a Halo-shaped void, and even better for them, Halo Infinite then got delayed. Though it's kind of funny, because Halo Infinite, while it's kind of in maintenance mode, has just slowly trucked on, while Splitgate has had nothing but chaos. So, with Halo Infinite being delayed, Splitgate was the natural beneficiary. Player counts absolutely spiked. They really soared up steam. But only for a while. You see, after a year of shrinking numbers, the team made a call, and that call was no more Splitgate. They decided that they could not update what they had, and they needed to do a fresh start. So they promised Splitgate 2. And July 2024 brought the big reveal of that game. There were trailers at the major showcases, which, by the way, are pretty damn expensive to secure. They hit 5 million views, there was a lot of hype, a lot of buzz, things looked good. Then 2025 brought the soft launch in May, and then the full launch added a Battle Royale mode, which players totally asked for. And it also brought the hat. Remember Summer Games Fest? The CEO Ian Prolux took the stage wearing his Make FPS Great Again hat. He was kind of insulting the entire FPS space as well. Social media ended up roasting him because while he was saying Make FPS Great Again, it turned out there was a whole big monetization mess that he then blamed an ex-employee for. Right? So he blamed an ex-employee for this egregious monetization, and it turns out that employee came from Call of Duty, the people that, he was roasting on social media. So basically, it was just mishandled. And by the end of June, they were already having to lay off staff, and he did, I will say to his credit, cut down his own salary. But now, a month later, a hell of a lot more is being cut. Today's story started with a blog post, Building the Splitgate You Deserve. And here's what they admitted. Quote, "We rushed certain features, made some boneheaded mistakes, and most importantly, we didn't give you the polished, portal-filled mayhem you fell in love with. And because of that, they're now unlaunching the game. As for what's going to change, well, progression reworks, more portal options on maps, simplified monetization, they say, as well as more classic modes. Basically everything that people complained about over the last 2 months. Because funnily enough, loads of people kinda just wanted it to be like Splitgate 1. The game they knew they really, really enjoyed, but that Splitgate 2 really kind of wasn't. So that's what 1047 are promising, but there is a catch, I would say. What they're going to do is keep Splitgate 2 playable during this reset. The monetization is going to stay on, and content is going to ship until Chapter 3. But after that, all of their focus will go into the relaunch of the game. But it's going to be all of their focus from fewer staff. They need money for the relaunch, they need to bring down their burn rate. Splitgate 2 has clearly not been bringing in enough, so because of that, they are laying off 45 more people, which is nearly 1/3 of the company. And in terms of pacing, that is the second round of layoffs in 2 months. And look, there is good stuff, right? People are getting severance and all of that. But it does speak to what I'm going to call one of the largest fumbles in modern gaming, especially in light of Halo Infinite coming out and then rapidly just kind of disappearing in the public zeitgeist. Maybe there's a world where Splitgate 1, had it have been fully developed up, maybe where it could have actually fulfilled real player needs, and where they could have got a real sustainable business. There's a thing looming over all of this, which is an extremely large amount of investment that the company got. And I'm fairly sure the pressures of that investment have led to the situation that we're in right now. But I'll get to that later, because there's another cost that they're cutting, and that cost is, well, Splitgate. the original Splitgate. Turns out those hundreds of daily players are just no longer worth it to the company, and according to 1047, maintaining console and PC servers has cost them, quote, hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past couple of years. The inference they're making is fairly clear. They're not getting anything back, so to pay developers, but not the executives who have given up their wages, which is a good thing, they are killing the original game. Because look, a few $100,000 probably is going to mean a few more jobs being retained. As for right now, there's no promises in bringing the game back. Obviously, in light of Stop Killing Games, well, this sort of thing is on our mind, and they said that they're exploring a peer-to-peer solution and maybe an offline mode. So, very much a topic in the Stop Killing Games wheelhouse, but I'll bench that for now. They've also, by the way, said that the Splitgate 2 relaunch, when it happens, will have modes that replicate the original Splitgate. Which again, if you feel like you've got to do that, maybe it says that Splitgate 1 could have been made into something. But look, that's for the future, and these last 2 months have kind of taught us something, that a hell of a lot can go fast. So the big question is, where does 1047 think they went wrong, and do we maybe think there's a difference between what they're saying and some of the realities? Because I think about that, just off the top of my head, like $100 million investment, and I do kind of think, what sort of strings, what sort of performance targets came with that? IGN's Rebecca Valentine interviewed CEO Ian Prolux, and, well, suffice to say, he does not sound like the very confident guy we saw sporting his big epic hat on the Summer Games Fest stage 2 months ago. And actually, on the topic of the hat, he does admit that it was a mistake, but he does think it's not the core problem, and I entirely agree with him. That was a PR blunder, but I think the real qualities were always that of the customer experience. Here's his take, though. Quote, I think the reality is, if this was a 10 out of 10 game, people would still be playing it and happily spending money and grinding and telling their friends. That's my feeling. He goes on to say that the past is the past. He admits they've made a lot of mistakes, and insofar as blame goes, he basically blames the game itself. And again, I would agree. He says that they've been reading the Reddit feedback threads, that every reply's been catalogued, and that most complaints that they've got are just about the game experience. And he essentially frames the game that they launched as already being a beta. Basically, 1.0 does kind of mean people think they're going to get a finished game and features like leaderboards on day one. And given that this is an audience that we know loved Splitgate 1, shockingly, they kinda liked the design of Splitgate 1, which Splitgate 2 did not fully deliver on. To put a long story short, Splitgate 2 had loads of round-based modes, but a lot of people kinda just did want the pure arena combat stuff from the first game. On top of that, there's timing, where they basically just let people wait for far too long, and essentially each part of the game, things like arena, battle royale, map creation, they just ended up being 80% done, instead of having one or two features, of that feature set, but at a 100% complete stage. That's very much what he's, saying in his own words, that they would have rather had one or two things 100% complete rather than a whole bunch of kind of almost there things. Then, of course, there's the money issue. Steamforge's Nick Lombardi went very viral with this analysis. The title's good. How 1047 Games spent $409,000 on influencers on Splitgate 2's failed launch. Prolux did say that that post and analysis was, in his words, about 60% right. Where, yes, they did spend fairly big in marketing, but very little of that converted to players. And his defense is basically that if the game was better, if it had less friction, then that marketing spend would have actually been worth it. And that difference between Splitgate 1 and 2, that might be the key. But here's what I really want to hit on here, right? Let's take a look at the language they're using, because 3 years ago they said that development had to end, quote, to build the game fans deserve. Yeah, you! That's why they had to kill Splitgate 1. You! Maybe not an absolutely humongous investment that they got. No, you. And it always does feel like that. It's very easy to say that, oh no, we made all of these terrible and very silly decisions because we really wanted to serve you as best as we could. When, of course, with Splitgate 1, they actually did have a player base. You see, up to this point in the video, it does seem like they're making these absolutely crazy decisions with this game. But you gotta remember, back then, right? Years ago, they were flush with investor cash. They'd already shown that they could make these massive player peaks. So they were probably feeling quite confident, and like they had, more resources than God to make a game. That's obviously not the case. They're in a very different position, and so too is the industry. It's amazing just how much 1047 is kind of a perfect example of the last 5 years of the games industry. Like, Splitgate launched in 2019, but it exploded during the 2021 console tests. The reason why was fairly simple. Talked about it earlier. Displaced Halo fans wanted an arena shooter, and everyone was trapped inside during the pandemic. Like, it really was the complete opposite of today, where the team had almost perfect timing. They essentially had 18 months of polish, they had a novel pitch, and then came the perfect timing in 2021. Halo plus Portal, right? It just makes sense to people. Like, say, Among Us, like Warzone, it was just that perfect time, riding the COVID wave. 10 million downloads during the open beta, and that reflects what happened industry-wide, where valuations went absolutely crazy. And by 2021, they'd raised $116 million, and $100 million of those dollars was in a single funding round. Money was flying all over the place, especially at proven developers. 1047 was just one of many that we've covered in this channel who are kind of facing this pattern where you had super bullish investors who very much now are not feeling as good. And what happens is, when you got, say, 20 mil sitting in the bank account because you've just hit a milestone, got a big chunky payment, yeah, you're going to feel confident. That means you're going to make mistakes. Now, when taking a look at everything that went down in 2021 for this video, we found a revealing quote from Ian Prolux. So revealing. He told TechCrunch that before 2020, investors didn't think the 1047 could compete with hero shooters or battle royales. If you fast forward to 2025, they launched with a battle royale mode to kind of chase those same players. And it's weird because in 2021, Splitgate had under 10 developers. In 2025, firing 45 people is a third of the company. Just think about the scale difference there. Everything about Splitgate 2 was bigger, had to be more ambitious, because it was no longer a game made by a team of 10. It was now a game well over $116 million in the company. Obviously, that's just fundamentally different, and Prolux now admits Splitgate 2 was, and I quote, too ambitious. The reason why? Well, maybe because he was aiming for a target that quite simply does not exist anymore. There's a lot of doom and gloom going on these days, and here's what we basically know in 2025. The market did not grow to support these developers. People saw the COVID spike, they basically thought, oh, this is going to continue to accelerate growth. For so many of these games, you need massive audiences, especially to fund that many developers long-term via a free-to-play product. And in many cases we've covered, investors didn't even let developers release anything. No, it had to be a big thing with massive potential upside, not something that is a bit smaller, but perhaps financially responsible. But there is a bigger problem. That problem is less spending on games in 2025. Yeah, cost of living's actually a thing. Fewer people are playing Fortnite. We're actually seeing less playtime in video games overall. So Splitgate 2 was a massive bet made in a different era. It was a bet made when they only had 2 cards in their hand, but now that we can actually see all the cards, it turns out what was in their hands quite simply was not enough. And it may never have been enough, because those expectations, I think, were almost always astronomically, unrealistically high. As it stands, 1047 gets one more chance. It's going to be a complete make or break next year. That is, of course, only if they're able to make it that far. And in return for you making it this far in the video, I think you should check out this one next. Basically, Sega made a really big mistake. They actually released, for a very brief amount of time, unredacted sales reports. And that means we have a very transparent look into the Total War franchise. So to learn all about that, watch this video next.